Welcome to the Silent Hours Tales, where the darkness speaks. Beware what lurks in the shadows.
No one could say exactly when the building stopped being normal. That was the problem. Nothing happened all at once. There was no explosion, no scream, no night where everyone woke up at the same moment knowing something was wrong. The change was quiet, subtle, the kind of change people only notice after it has already settled deep into their lives. The apartment building on Ravel Street had been standing for nearly a century. Old brick, narrow hallways, uneven stairs that creaked no matter how carefully you walked. People complained about it, but they trusted it. Old buildings felt permanent, predictable. They aged the way people did, slowly, visibly, honestly. This one had 4 floors. Everyone knew that. You could walk the stairs in the dark and count them by memory. First floor, lobby and storage. Second floor, apartments 2A to 2D. Third floor, 3A to 3D. Fourth floor, 4A and 4B. Then the stairwell ended at a small window that looked out over the alley. That window mattered. People leaned on it when they smoked. They opened it in summer to let heat escape. It had been there longer than most of the tenants. On a Tuesday morning, the window was gone. In its place stood a door. It was gray, flat, unremarkable. No number, no decoration, just a door set cleanly into the concrete wall as if it had always belonged there. Leah noticed it first, mostly because she was late and annoyed and not in the mood for surprises. She stopped halfway down the 3rd floor hallway, keys in hand, staring at the door with a faint crease between her eyebrows. Her first thought was simple: I'm more tired than I thought. She turned away, took 3 steps, then stopped again. The hallway felt shorter. The air felt heavier near the end. She walked closer. Her first thought was simple: I'm more tired than I thought. She turned away, took 3 steps, then stopped again. The hallway felt shorter. The air felt heavier near the end. She walked closer. The door didn't smell like fresh paint. It didn't smell old either. It smelled like nothing, which somehow felt worse. Leah reached out, then hesitated. The silence around it felt deliberate, like the building itself was holding its breath. She pulled her hand back and went to work. That should have been the end of it. By evening, 3 other tenants had noticed the door. Each reacted differently. One laughed and assumed it had always been there. One complained to the landlord. One stared at it for a long time without speaking. The landlord arrived the next day, red-faced and defensive, insisting no construction had been done. He tried to open the door. It didn't move. He knocked. The sound was dull, wrong somehow, like knocking on packed earth instead of wood. No echo came back. He told everyone it was probably an old service entrance that had been sealed and forgotten. That explanation satisfied no one, but people accepted it anyway. People always prefer a weak explanation over none at all. The first knock came that night. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not aggressive, careful, measured, like someone making sure they were heard. In the morning, everyone claimed they thought it was a dream. The second night, the knocking came again. This time, someone answered. No one ever admitted to it, but the sound of footsteps had followed the knocks, soft and uneven, pacing the hallway for nearly an hour. After that, the smells began. Cold stone, damp metal, something deep and underground. Plants in the building started dying even when watered. The lights on the 3rd floor flickered more than usual. Phones lost signal near the door. Leah began having dreams. Always the same structure, though the details changed. She stood in the hallway. The door was open. Inside was not a room, but a vast dark space that bent inward like a throat. She could hear breathing, not panicked, not strained, but patient, familiar, as if it had always known her. On the 5th day, apartment 3B was empty. No signs of struggle, no mess, no broken locks, just absence. The tenant's furniture was gone, his clothes, his photographs, his name on the mailbox, his name in conversations. When Leah asked about him, people frowned, confused, insisting no one had ever lived there. The space where his door had been felt slightly warmer than the rest of the hallway, like a body had just left it. That night, the door at the end of the hallway opened a crack. The breathing stopped. Something inside whispered. Not words, just pressure, like a thought pressing outward, searching for shape. Leah stood in her doorway, unable to move, as the crack slowly widened. Darkness spilled into the hallway, thick and unnatural, swallowing sound. From deep inside the space beyond the door came a sensation, not fear, not hunger, but expectation, as if the building itself had been waiting for something to finally arrive. Somewhere below, the foundation groaned. Somewhere above, a floor shifted where no floor should have been. And in the quiet that followed, the door closed again. Softly, patiently, like it had all the time in the world. After the door closed, the building did not return to normal. That was the lie everyone tried to tell themselves, but the truth pressed through the cracks no matter how carefully they avoided it. Sounds changed first. The building had always been noisy, pipes knocking, radiators hissing, footsteps echoing through thin walls. But now the noises felt intentional, timed, as if something inside the structure was listening and responding. Footsteps were heard where no one lived. Doors opened and closed on floors that had been sealed for years. The elevator, which had been broken for as long as anyone could remember, began stopping between floors, its bell ringing once in the dark before continuing on its way. Leah stopped using the stairs at night. Everyone did, even if they wouldn't admit why. The 3rd floor felt stretched, like the distance between apartments subtly shifted when no one was looking. Apartment 3B remained empty, but sometimes light leaked from beneath its door. Warm light, the kind that suggested someone was home. People stopped asking questions, not because they weren't afraid, but because fear had begun to feel normal. The office ambiance abandoned, the landlord stopped answering calls. His office downstairs sat unlocked, desk covered in dust, chair slightly pulled back as if he had stood up and never returned. Records vanished, leases rewritten themselves, names blurred on mailboxes until they were unreadable. Leah noticed the change in herself next. She began forgetting small things at first, where she placed her keys, which day it was, how long she had lived there. Then larger things started slipping: her childhood home, her mother's voice, the face of her best friend. But every time something disappeared from her memory, something else took its place. She could feel it filling the space, heavy and cold, like wet cement poured into her thoughts. The dreams intensified. The hallway grew longer, the door wider. Inside, the darkness no longer felt empty. Shapes moved slowly, stretching and contracting, pressing against unseen boundaries. Sometimes she sensed others there with her, standing just out of sight, all facing the same direction, all waiting. One night, she dreamed she was the building. She felt its weight pressing into the ground, felt every tenant moving through her halls like blood through veins. Beneath her foundation, something vast shifted and settled, adjusting itself to better support the load above. When she woke, her feet were covered in fine gray dust, and her apartment floor was warm to the touch. On the 10th night, someone screamed. A real scream, sharp, panicked, human. It came from the stairwell between the 3rd and 4th floors. Doors opened all along the building as people stepped into the hallway at the same time, drawn by instinct more than sound. The scream cut off abruptly, replaced by a low groaning noise that vibrated through the walls. The door at the end of the hallway was open again, wider than the 4.
This time, light spilled out, not bright, but dim and deep, like light filtered through water. Inside was no longer just darkness. There were stairs, endless stairs, spiraling downward into something vast and unseen. The air that poured out smelled old, not rotten, not decayed, buried, like soil that had not seen daylight in centuries. A man stepped forward without speaking. No one stopped him. It was as if the decision had already been made long before he moved. He took one step toward the door, then another. The stairs inside shifted slightly to meet his feet. The building creaked in approval. When he disappeared inside, the door did not close. The groaning stopped. The scream never returned. The next morning, no one remembered his name. His apartment was empty, clean, as if it had never been lived in. Leah realized then that the building was not hunting, it was selecting, removing weight, redistributing it. The structure of the place made more sense now. The extra hallway length, the missing tenants, the way the foundation never cracked despite the strain. The building was deeper than it was tall, far deeper. The city records, when she finally found them, showed something impossible. The plot of land beneath Ravel Street was marked with old warnings, erased and overwritten so many times they barely showed. Not condemned, not restricted, just one repeated note, written in different handwriting across decades. Do not dig. On the 14th night, the power went out completely. Not just the building, the entire block. Darkness pressed in, thick and absolute. Emergency lights flickered once, then died. In that silence, Leah heard breathing again. Not from the door, from the walls, from the floor beneath her feet, from inside herself. The building was no longer hiding what it was. It wanted to be acknowledged. It wanted to be known. The door opened fully. The stairs inside shifted and widened, no longer pretending to be anything human. Far below, something massive adjusted its position, and the building shuddered as if relieved. Leah stood in the hallway, heart pounding, understanding settling over her like cold stone. The building was not cursed. It was built, on purpose, around something that could never be allowed to rise. And now, after decades of added floors and added lives and added weight, it was finally full. The breathing grew slower, deeper, patient. The building was ready for the next phase, and it was waiting for someone who understood what had to be done next.
By the 15th day, the building no longer pretended to obey the rules of space. The stairwell between the 3rd and 4th floors stretched when watched and shortened when ignored. Apartments subtly rearranged themselves. Doors that once faced each other now opened onto blank walls. Windows looked out onto angles of the city that should not have been visible from that height. No one questioned it anymore. Questioning required certainty, and certainty had been quietly removed. The remaining tenants moved carefully, speaking in low voices, avoiding the end of the hallway where the door now stood permanently open. The stairs beyond it no longer descended at a human angle. They curved inward, narrowing and widening as if shaped by breath rather than design. The air flowing up from below carried a low vibration that settled into the chest and refused to leave. Leah stopped going outside. The city beyond Ravel Street felt unreal now, like a painted backdrop stretched too thin. Time behaved differently inside the building. Hours passed without hunger. Sleep came without rest. Sometimes Leah would blink and find herself standing in the hallway with no memory of leaving her apartment. Sometimes she would wake on the stairs, fingers numb, dust coating her palms, the sound of movement far below echoing through her bones. Others experienced the same thing, though no one admitted it directly. They spoke around it, careful with language, as if naming the truth might cause the walls to tighten. On the 17th night, the building spoke clearly for the first time. Not in words, not in sound, but in alignment.
Every door on every floor opened at once. Every light flickered on, glowing a dim amber that did not come from electricity. The walls warmed, the floor steadied, the building felt focused. Leah stood in her doorway and understood without being told that something beneath them had shifted into a final position. She followed the pull to the stairwell, joining the others as they gathered silently, eyes hollow, movements slow. No one blocked the door, no one resisted. Resistance would have required believing there was still somewhere else to go. The stairs were wider now, smoother, carved with shallow impressions that resembled footprints worn by centuries of use. As they descended, the walls changed texture, brick giving way to poured concrete, then to bare stone, then to something older, rock smoothed by pressure rather than tools. Symbols appeared along the walls, not carved but pressed outward, as if the stone itself remembered them. Leah recognized the sensation instantly. Not language, instruction. The deeper they went, the more memories pressed into them that did not belong to any single person. Cities layered atop older cities, foundations poured over sealed chambers, councils voting to build higher rather than dig deeper, warnings erased, engineers bribed, maps altered. The building had not been an accident, it had been a solution. At the bottom of the stairs, space opened into something vast and impossible, a chamber so large it could not logically exist beneath a 4-story structure. The ceiling arched high above, disappearing into shadow. The floor was a smooth basin of dark stone, cracked in places where pressure had been redistributed over time. And at the center of it all was the thing the building had been built to contain. It was not a creature in the way Leah had imagined. It had no clear edges, no face, no limbs. It was mass and density given patience, a shape defined by what it held rather than what it was. Portions of it pressed upward into the chamber walls, fused seamlessly with the surrounding stone. Veins of darker material ran through it, pulsing slowly, adjusting constantly to the load above. Leah felt the truth settle fully now. The city had been built on top of a load-bearing entity, not alive in the way people were alive in the way continents were alive. It held weight, excess, ambition, the collective pressure of everything built without regard for what lay beneath. The building was not feeding it, it was managing it, regulating how much could be placed above without causing collapse. But the city had grown careless, taller, heavier, and the threshold had been reached. One by one, the other tenants stepped forward, drawn by different instincts: guilt, fear, relief, obedience. The chamber responded to each approach, shifting subtly, testing. Some were rejected immediately, the pressure pushing them back towards the stairs. Others made it closer, only to collapse under the weight of what they suddenly understood. When Leah stepped forward, the chamber steadied. The vibration eased, the mass beneath her adjusted, as if recognizing a compatible structure. Images flooded my mind, not demands, not threats, calculations, ratios, balance sheets written in pressure and time. The entity did not want worship, it did not want destruction, it required redistribution. The weight above had to be carried somewhere, if not by structure, then by will. The building trembled as something far above collapsed, another tenant removed, another floor subtly reconfigured to compensate. Leah realized then what the selection truly meant. People were not being taken as punishment, they were being integrated, converted into load-bearing components. The city had been doing this for decades without knowing. The missing tenants, the forgotten names, the sense of absence no one could quite explain. The entity shifted again, and this time the pressure focused entirely on Leah. Not crushing, inviting, offering understanding at a terrible cost. She could step back, Someone else eventually would step forward, or many would, or the city itself would sink until the weight balanced naturally. The building groaned softly, not in pain, but in anticipation. The calculation was nearly complete. And for the first time since the door had appeared, Leah felt the faint outline of a choice forming, thin and fragile and heavy enough to reshape everything above and below, if she accepted it.
Leah stood at the edge of the chamber while the building above her breathed in slow, measured intervals. The others had stopped moving. Some had sunk to their knees, overwhelmed by the weight of understanding. Others had already turned back toward the stairs, retreating into denial, into whatever version of normal they could still cling to for a little while longer. The entity beneath the floor did not hurry them. It had never hurried anyone. Time pressed against it, not the other way around. Leah felt the choice fully now, not as words or images, but as alignment. She could feel how her thoughts settled into the pressure, how her fear did not spike but flattened, spread evenly, becoming something usable. The chamber responded to this shift immediately. The vibrations softened. The cracks in the stone around her sealed slightly, like skin tightening around a wound. Above them, far beyond the limits of sound, a floor stabilized that had been on the verge of collapse. Leah understood then that the entity was already using her, lightly, carefully, testing how much could be placed upon her without breaking her entirely. She stepped forward once. The stone beneath her feet rose to meet her, warm and dense, forming a shallow depression shaped perfectly for her stance. Her heart raced, then slowed as something deep synchronized with it. This was not surrender, this was integration. Memories that were not hers flowed through her awareness, not as stories but as structural data. Cities built too fast, councils choosing convenience over consequence, engineers signing off on weight limits they knew were lies, generations benefiting from foundations they never bothered to question. The entity did not judge these memories, it simply accounted for them. Leah felt her body begin to change, subtly at first. Not pain, not yet. Her breath deepened, each inhale carrying more than air, each exhale releasing tension she hadn't known she carried. Her feet rooted more firmly into the stone, not trapped but supported. The building above creaked softly, relieved. Somewhere far above, a tenant stumbled as a hallway shifted slightly, redistributing load that Leah now partially carried. She heard it through the structure, not with ears but with awareness. She could feel the building as a whole now, the pipes, the wires, the cracks hidden behind walls. She felt the city too, faintly, like distant weather. This was what the entity was, not a monster, not a god, a system, an ancient answer to a problem humanity kept recreating. It did not demand a single bearer, it accepted many, but a single willing integration stabilized everything faster. Leah thought of the others who had vanished over the years, absorbed quietly, unknowingly. They had resisted until the pressure broke them down into function. That was the cruelty, not the integration itself, but the lack of choice. She would not be taken that way. She pressed her palms against the stone and made the decision fully, consciously. The chamber reacted violently, not in rejection, but in completion. Stone surged upward around her legs, her waist, her ribs, forming supports that mirrored her shape without crushing it. Symbols pressed themselves into the surface of her skin, not burning, not carving, but embedding meaning directly into structure. She screamed once, reflexively, as her bones reinforced, her muscles redistributed, her nervous system stretched into something broader and slower. The scream echoed upward through the building, and every tenant felt it, even if they did not know what it was. Above ground, the door at the end of the hallway closed for the first time since it appeared. The stairs beyond it dissolved back into concrete, the hallway shortened, apartments snapped back into alignment, the building exhaled. Power returned to the block in a quiet wave, lights flickered on across Ravel Street. People emerged from their apartments cautiously, confused, exhausted, unable to explain why the air felt lighter. In the chamber below, the entity settled into a new configuration. Leah did not disappear. She remained present, aware, holding a portion of the weight that had once been spread across dozens of unwilling supports.
The pressure was immense, but it was even, balanced. She could feel the limits now, clearly, how much the city could grow, where reinforcement would be needed, when the ground would resist instead of collapse. She was not in control, she was part of the calculation. Days passed above, then weeks. The city council quietly halted new construction projects after several unexplained foundation failures. Inspectors reported strange resistance in the soil beneath certain districts. Builders adjusted plans. No one knew why caution had suddenly become necessary, only that ignoring it felt dangerous. Leah felt each decision as a subtle shift in load. Some nights were heavier than others. On those nights, cracks would appear in sidewalks as warnings. A leaning tower would settle instead of falling. The city learned slowly, unconsciously, guided by resistance rather than disaster. Deep below, Leah no longer measured time the way she once had. She did not sleep, she did not dream, but she remembered herself clearly, anchored by the choice she had made. She was still Leah, she simply carried more than a body was ever meant to carry alone. Occasionally, she felt others near the threshold, people drawn to the building by stress, guilt, exhaustion, an unnameable pull. The entity allowed them to approach. Some touched the stone and pulled away. A few stayed, integrating lightly, temporarily, easing pressure during moments of excess. Choice changed everything. The system no longer needed to steal. Years later, when people spoke of Ravel Street, they described it as oddly stable. Buildings around it cracked and shifted with age, but that one remained steady, unremarkable, forgettable. The door never returned, the fourth-floor window stayed a window. And far beneath it all, Leah held the line between ambition and collapse, listening to the slow, constant language of weight and balance. The world above would never know her name, that was part of the cost, but the city stood. And as long as someone chose to hold what others refused to see, it would continue to stand, quietly, patiently, unaware of how close it had once been to sinking into itself.